Good evening and welcome to the Culinary Historians of Chicago. And we have a very celebrated author tonight, Peter Reinhart. He's an expert, but I'll tell you about him in a second. But Peter's here in celebration of his newest book, Peter Reinhart's Never-Ending Search for the Perfect Pizza. He's an award-winning authority, and he returns for his third visit, or it might be four, to the Culinary Historians of Chicago. Peter is the author of 13 books on bread, food, and culture, and of course, pizza. His books have won 4 James Beard and IACP awards, including Cookbook of the Year for his book from 20 years ago, The Bread Baker's Apprentice. Peter's a faculty member at Johnson & Wales University in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the executive director of the Johnson & Wales International Symposium on Bread, as well as the host and founder of the video website, pizzaquest.com, where he continues to chronicle his never-ending search for the perfect pizza. And Peter's also a friend of mine. We've known each other for many years, and I've even had the pleasure of sharing rooms with him at food writers conferences. And I know one night before we turned off the lights, I had his book with me. So I said, will you sign your book before you go to bed? So that's pretty neat when you're asking somebody for an autograph and they're your roommate. And an extended member of the family, a member of my extended family, was talking to me about bread once. And he was saying, oh, you've got to do this and that. And he said, I learned this from Peter Reinhart from reading his books. And I told this friend, this relative, that, oh, he's a friend of mine. And the guy almost fell over. He couldn't believe that I knew Peter. So this guy is not chopped liver. That's all I can say. And we're going to listen to him now, and he's going to give us a crusty talk on pizza and pizza history. Peter, please take it away.
Thank you, Scott. And it's good to be back. It's good to be back. The food historians. It feels like, I think it's my 4th time, but of course you lose track of these things. And you know, the pandemic just sort of knocked out all memory cells. So I feel like we're starting fresh, but I'm glad to be back. The first time doing it via Zoom, but at least we get to make it happen. I was hoping to come into Chicago again, which is one of my favorite things to do. And the last time that I was there, when we were talking about a book that I had called Perfect Pan Pizza back then. And afterwards, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Scott, we had that. We held it in a venue that was like a assisted living center, so half the audience were residents of the assisted living center who, had been rolled down in wheelchairs. And then we had a few food historians there as well. So I think this time we're going to get a more targeted audience. But again, thank you for joining us tonight. What I'm going to do is talk about my new book, and it's called Pizza Quest, My Never-Ending Search for the Perfect Pizza. Well, I wanted to actually, the subtitle for the book was supposed to be My Never-Ending Search for the Perfect Pizza Continues. And my editor wouldn't let me use the word continues in the subtitle because she said it's redundant. And I said, no, because the first book I did on pizza was called My Never-Ending Search for the Perfect Pizza. So I wanted to add continues. And she said, no, it's redundant. You can't do it. And she wouldn't let me do it. But I still sometimes will just slip and say it continues, because this book is about the continuation of this search that began over 15 years ago with American Pie, and continued in the book Perfect Pan Pizza, and now continues here, and evolved into a website and podcast that we call Pizza Quest. It's a series of video webisodes, interviews with a whole lot of pizza luminaries. And the pandemic is actually probably the trigger for what made this book happen, because when we couldn't get back on the road and film at venues, at pizzerias, and interview people face to face, we wanted to do something to fill the void. And we started doing these Zoom interviews. I had never even done a Zoom before, but you learned pretty quickly how to do them, and it came around just at the right time. Zoom and other kinds of these interactive mediums came along just in time to kind of make communication possible. So I started interviewing a lot of people that I met over the years during these searches and run into at pizza expos and events like that. And the interviews were great. And we explored with each of these people, number one, how they were surviving, how their businesses were surviving the pandemic, we got a little bit deeper into their own story and what it was that drove them individually, each of them to achieve greatness in the realm of pizza in a large category in which there's tens of thousands of operators, but only now a few hundred. And at the time I wrote my first pizza book, there were maybe less than 50 pizzerias that could be called great, great destination pizzerias in this country. And now there are hundreds, but there are also thousands of others that are good. And so I'm going to get into sort of that narrative here in a second when I will walk through this I'll call it a device or a way to frame tonight's talk through the 10 commandments of pizza, which is, it takes up only one page of the book, but it gives me sort of a structure to be able to tell the story. And I've got some photos from the book to help provide some illustrations of the narrative. There's only time to do some of these photos. The book itself features from the people I interviewed on the Pizza Quest podcast, which now exists both as a video podcast, the Zoom version, and then Heritage Radio Network picked up an option to do an audio version. So now all of the early, and we did literally dozens, probably 60 or so of these video interviews, maybe 70. And now they're running on different schedules on my website, pizzaquest.com, but also on Heritage Radio, on every podcast, carrier now has Pizza Quest, and they have the audio version. So we're reaching a lot more people as a result of that. And in most of the interviews, the person who I'm talking to will usually end with some kind of a demonstration. They might show us a signature pie that they're doing, or technique that they've developed, or a method for how they make their dough. And of course, that's hard to show on the radio, so I just try to be as descriptive as I can and repeat what they're doing and add words to their actions. And what happened was after we were doing this for over a year and we had all this content, I realized that we had accumulated a tremendous amount of intellectual content, of great content from some of the best pizza makers in the world. And I thought, why don't we kind of consolidate that into a book? And I asked the people who had participated if anybody would like to have one of their pizzas featured in a book. And if they did, let me know. And then we worked with each of the ones who said yes to hone in on the one or two pizzas that we would actually include. And the challenge, as any of you who are writers know, is there's all these geniuses out there doing pizza their way. I didn't want to ask them to have to reveal any secret techniques or proprietary methods. What I wanted to do was get a beauty shot of the pizza that we were going to feature. And then I would do what I called a tribute version. I would create a homemaker's version of that pizza using my knowledge as a bread guy and a dough baker, that I could create a variation of that would be, as I described it, and some of you read this, that these guys are the Beatles of the pizza world, and I'm like the house band at the Marriott, playing their greatest hits. So I'm the cover band. And I said, so I'm going to do cover versions of your greatest hits, but you need to give me a photo so I know what I'm shooting for, and general description and enough information so I could create a homemaker's version of that. And then I created 4 master doughs that could be used to do any of these various styles of pizza. And then we went for it. And we ended up in the end with 35 pizzas that are featured in the book. There certainly could have been many, many others. There's some that just didn't come in time, or people who I interviewed after the book went to press. So we have enough material to probably do another book if this one does well. But we have, of those 35, there are 30 people that contributed them. There's a few people that have two recipes in the book, 2 pizzas in the book. And so I'm going to walk you through it. And in fact, I'm going to share my screen. And at the end, I'll try to leave some time for Q&A. So I'll go through this fairly quickly. But let me just sort of fly through this before we take any questions. Great. So this is the cover shot of the book. This is a pizza that came to us, and I'll tell you a little of the backstory of some of these pizzas that we're featuring today. So this is a pizza that was made by a guy in LA named Justin De Leon at Apollonia's Pizzeria. Some of you will know some of these places, and please forgive me if I'm omitting, both from the book and from the presentation tonight, your favorite pizzerias, that ones that you think should have made the book. As I said, we could only include so many, and I wanted to leave room for volume 2 and volume 3. So we got the ones that I could get. and we were able to put this together. So Justin has become famous on Instagram and social media for his pizza photography as well as his pizzas. He was a professional fashion and food photographer before he got into opening his pizzeria in LA, and he started focusing in on these Detroit style pizzas. He makes other kinds of pizzas as well, but what he figured out was a technique for causing the cheese to climb up the pan, the sides of the pan, to create what he calls a crown. And so his crown pizzas have become a little bit of an internet sensation. It's put him on the map, got him a lot of attention, and his pizzeria is now known everywhere because of his visual work, and the pizzas themselves are great. Nancy Silverton of Pizzeria Zamozza, who's not included in the book because I didn't really want to try to replicate some of her pizzas for this, but she was interviewed on the quest, and in that interview, she's the one who told me I needed to seek this guy out. And so this is a pizza, and those are like dollops of a ricotta cheese that goes on after the pizza comes out of the oven. The hallmark and the point of these Detroit pizzas and why they're getting so much traction, and many of you know this, and I'll be saying things that a lot of you already know, but for the sake of those who don't, the Detroit pizzas have gotten a lot of traction lately because they have, when they're done right, they have a phenomenal undercrust. They kind of a hot buttery toast quality that when you bite into it, it just shatters in your mouth like toffee. And then they're loaded with cheese, and you can do anything on top that you want. They're a little thicker than a Neapolitan style pizza, but when done right, the crust should be so good that it's not like, wait, there's too much dough here. It's kind of like, there's not enough. I want more crust. I want more crust. That's what it's done right. And Justin's an example of them. Now, what I'm going to do is, as I go through some of these, I'm going to read some of these commandments, and I'm just using the term commandments as a way to sort of frame the book and move the story forward. But I coined these as a way to kind of identify the guiding principles that led me to determine my version of what I consider to be a great pizza. And because this book, as all my books, are really about the difference between good and great. And so there's thousands of pizzerias in America. Most of them are making really good pizza, but there's only a few that have broken from the pack. And that's kind of the story I wanted to tell us. What is it that they're doing that differentiates them? Why are there's, getting notoriety? Why, and what makes them great? What defines greatness? So I'm going to start with this first commandment. There are only two kinds of pizza: good and very good. And by very good, I mean great. And by great, I mean memorable. Memorableness means you can't stop thinking about it. Can't wait to go back. Can't wait to take your friends. This is the determination of greatness. So that's how that's how I broke the pack. There's pizza, and then there's those places that you obsess about. I could have put the word obsess in there, but really that's what it comes down to. We're talking about a level of obsessiveness that gets into your brain and into your taste bud hall of fame and makes you want to go back and take people back there. So that's what we're looking for. And what is it that these people are doing that are getting us there? So let's see what the next one. So this is one of the pizzas that we're featuring in the book, and this is what we call Clams Casino. This one was developed and submitted by Brian Spangler, who is the owner and founder of A Pizza Shoals in Portland, Oregon. I've already gotten some. I saw somebody on Amazon in their review said that they loved the book, but they were, being from New Haven, they were very offended by the fact that I used a Clams pizza that wasn't New Haven style. But of course, the New Haven pizzerias have been doing it for a long time, and they weren't the ones that we're trying to feature in this book. We're trying to do something unique. So this is one that Brian developed, and I'll tell you a little bit of the story of this one. A Pizza Shoals has been around now for about 15, 17 years. It opened right after my first book, American Pie, and I knew Brian before he opened his pizzeria. He was an artisan bread baker like me, and we were on the Bread Bakers Guild board together, and we were all in the bread world. But he told me at one point that one of his dreams was to open a pizzeria. And the next time I got back to Portland, my first pizza book had come out, and a reporter took me, wanted to do the interview while I was on tour, kind of promoting the book, to a new pizzeria to kind of do a set, make that the setting, give it the backdrop. And they took me out to this little town called Shoal Valley, and there's a Pizza Shoals. And out walks Brian from the kitchen, and I go, "Oh my God, you did it! This is your pizzeria." He says, "Yeah." He says, "I can't believe you pulled the trigger. You're actually doing it." He says, "I know I'm crazy, but I had to do it. I had to get it out of my system." And what happened was the article came out. It was a really nice article about the book, and in it we talked about how great Brian's Pizza was there, and the pizzeria became like a big hit. Everybody started driving out the 45 minutes out the Shoal Valley, and it became so popular that the citizens, the residents of the valley, approached Brian, and they said, "Congratulations, on your success, but we'd like to ask you to leave." He said, "You're bringing too much traffic to our peaceful little valley," and he couldn't believe it. But you know what? It was the best thing that could happen to him, because it forced him to go into Portland itself, reopen, and he's been there now for 15 years and has become, one of the top, in any top 10 or top 20 list, a Pizza Shoals, doing what he would describe as sort of a New Haven, New York style pizza, not a Neapolitan pizza, not a Detroit pizza, but more in the New York pizza style, in a way that evoked his food memories from growing up in the East Coast. He wanted to do something on the West Coast that matched those memories. And he's been tweaking his recipes over the years. He's never satisfied with what he's got. And that's one of the hallmarks of these artisan pizzerias, and the great, the ones that separate themselves and are great, is that they're always, they're constantly digging in deeper to try to push the envelope of what their pizza can be. So he had been discovered by a number of people, including Anthony Bourdain, who was filming in the Portland area for one of his shows, and he did some footage with Brian. And at the end of the day, they were just totally exhausted, and Anthony was hungry, and he says, "Can you make me a pizza?" And they talked about what he should make, and he said, "You know what I really love? I love clam pizzas." And Brian didn't have one on the menu, but he had a bag of clams, manila clams, and he said, "I'll make you a clam pizza with bacon." And he kind of created what we call Clams Casino. Clams Casino is, if you grew up in the East Coast where I did, you could get a plate of these baked clams with crumbled bacon and seasoned breadcrumbs and Tabasco on it and some parsley, and you just pop them. And so this pizza basically is a Clams Casino on a pizza. And it was delicious. It's a beautiful shot. And let me see if I have a little quote from him. The thing that I always am wary about, and the reason why the Frank Pepe white clam pizza from New Haven is so iconic, because it really is one of the most famous pizzas in America, even though it's now 4 generations into their operation, is because it's loaded with clams. But they're not clams in the shell. And most places, and one of the things I don't like about ordering a clam pizza, especially in a Neapolitan, wood-fired Neapolitan restaurant, is that they usually put only like 6 clams on the pizza. And it's like, I call it a clam tease. It's just not enough clams. And so Brian felt the same. We talked about that in the interview, and this is what he wrote. First, this is what I wrote. "One of the things that separates this clam in the shell pie from any other I've had is the sheer abundance of clams. As Brian told me, I'm not going to tease you with 6 or 7 clams like everyone else does. If I'm making a clam pizza, you can damn well be sure it will be a friggin' clam festival." And I wrote a note, and if you know Brian, he didn't say the word friggin'. So this is an example of sort of his bold, over-the-top version, and Bourdain loved it and ended up featuring it in, I think it was No Reservations. So that's just one of the pizzas. And again, on this, we use on this pizza, we use one of the doughs is the New York pizza dough. The 4 doughs are a classic white dough, more Neapolitan style for wood fire style pizzas, New York style, which again is in the same family. All these pizza doughs are in the same family, and another one, but it's a little stiffer and it can roll out, can be rolled out wider. And then there's a pan pizza dough, which is high hydration, kind of like a ciabatta style dough, designed to be baked in a pan. It can be used for focaccias. It can be used for Sicilians, and then sourdough. We have sourdough pizza, and that's one of the emerging trends. And we'll talk about that in a second. Is that in doing the book, I really got a chance to zero in on some of the trends that I've noticed around the country and where we think pizza is going, and not just where it's been. So let me go back. I'm going to keep interspersing a commandment with a photo. So the next one is, there's no such thing as the perfect pizza. there are only perfect pizzas. And I give a thank you here there to a man named Howard Moskowitz and Malcolm Gladwell for this concept. And all I'll say about that is, if you haven't heard Malcolm Gladwell's TED Talk on working with Howard Moskowitz, a food consultant, on developing pasta sauces for Prego, just go to TED, put in Malcolm Gladwell pasta sauce and watch his talk. It's brilliant. And in that, this guy, Howard Moskowitz, made a career out of going to companies and convincing them of one thing, that the public does not want a perfect platonic version of a product. There's no one spaghetti sauce that works for everybody. And there's no one cola. He consulted with Coke and Pepsi. There's no one perfect Coke. There's no one perfect Pepsi. There are only perfect colas, meaning that there's something perfect for everybody. And if you could get that idea in your head, then what happened was Prego ended up coming out with something like, 30 or 40 different variations of pasta sauce, and leapfrogged over Ragu, which was the industry leader who only had a couple. And then, of course, Ragu saw what they were doing, so they started coming out with more. And so this started a whole trend towards realizing that there's different strokes for different folks. So here's an example of another pizza. This one is from what is now one of the hottest pizzerias in America. Some of you may have heard of it or may have been there even. It's just outside New York City. It's in Jersey City, and it's called Raza. Pizzeria Raza, and the proprietor, the pizzaiolo there, is a guy named Dan Richer, and Dan just came out with a terrific pizza book. I think it's called The Joy of Pizza, Dan is the hot new pizza guy. 15, 20 years ago, when I wrote American Pie, the emerging poster boy for this artisan pizza movement was Chris Bianco. And I wrote a lot about Chris Bianco from Pizzeria Bianco in Phoenix, Arizona, still making, one of the best pizzas that you've ever had. But the distance between what he was doing then and everyone else who's kind of caught up since, learning a lot of the same techniques and applying the principles and coming in to it with the same amount of zeal and level of earnestness and caring. In fact, Chris's great line in American Pie was that I can teach people my tricks, but I can't teach them to care as much as I care. If they cared as much as me, I can make them a great pizza maker. And that's what's happened since. This whole evolving pizza scene has been the emergence of dozens and dozens of people who really care about what they're doing. They're approaching this as a craft and not just as a business. So Dan is doing it. Now, this is one that he only makes for like about 6 weeks during the summer. He calls it his peak summer corn with smoked cheese. It's relatively simple. The ingredients are essentially fresh mozzarella, a little bit of onion, fresh corn, and he will only use corn during those peak few weeks when it's at its sweetest and best, and that's part of the trademark of his places. It's all seasonal, farm to table stuff, and it's all about the ingredients. But his crust is also a sourdough crust, and he's one of the few he started out being among the few. Now there's a whole lot more people getting into the sourdough category of pizza crust. Dan's success is one of the things that's driven him. He's not the only one, but he's one of the people that has driven the sourdough movement in pizza. He's also got some smoked scamorza cheese, a little bit of smoked cheese, which is kind of like a smoked mozzarella. And then he finishes it off with chili paste, like a Calabrian sambal chili paste, and then some fresh flaky salt. But it's simple. You can see the simplicity of this pie, and yet people can't get enough of it. And it's mainly because the flavors just explode in your mouth. To backtrack a little bit, I have to say that for me, one of the things that makes pizza the most popular food, and I'll say arguably the most popular food in the world in its various forms, whether it's Italian style or, the variations of pizza, is that it's just dough with something on it. If pizza in its definition is dough with something on it, there's a lot of products that are not called pizza, but that could be called pizza in a way. Like, for instance, a quesadilla is dough with something either in it or on it. It's kind of like a Tex-Mex pizza. A grilled cheese sandwich could be kind of a variation of pizza. There's something about dough with something on it or in it. So we could throw sandwiches in there as well, but dough with something on it or in it works. And the reason it works is because it delivers flavor. Ultimately, that's the bottom line. Pizza is the perfect flavor delivery system when it's done well. It's a perfect system, whether it's done well or not well. It works even at the average level. Frozen pizzas would never be called destination pizza, but yet we sell millions of them every single day and consume millions of them because dough with something on it works. And so when you find somebody who's able to do it at a higher level, and the dough, itself is great and the toppings are great, then you've elevated this, from sort of the mundane to a craft experience that can be a showstopper. It stops conversation. So Raza is one of those places. The next commandment, I'm going to keep moving forward. When it comes to toppings, more is not always better. Better is better. So of course, one of the challenges in the, as American pizza kind of took hold and we started getting pizza chains everywhere and, pizza everywhere, the kitchen sink pizza became a thing. And I guess the premise was that if we put a whole bunch of stuff on it, then there's going to be something on there for someone to like. There's a lot of flavors. The problem is if the flavors are, if there's too many conflicting flavors or too many flavors, they muddle. They create a flavor muddle. And what you want is for each ingredient to shine. Dan Richer here at Raza, he was a fine dining chef, classically trained chef before, as are a number of people who've gotten into the pizza world. And so for him, it's all about the quality of the ingredients and delivering them, showcasing them in a way that let's say fulfills their promise, or as I say about bread, it evokes the full potential of flavor trapped in the ingredients. So a simple pizza like that, when you take each bite is a flavor burst that can bring tears to your eyes. And that's what these people are going for. Now talk about simplicity. So more is not better. So this is a slice of kind of on a New York style pizza. We call it the Hellboy slice. And it's just like a sauce and cheese pizza with pepperoni. But right now there's a big movement in the artisan pizza world to get a higher quality pepperoni. Pepperoni can be a great sausage. It's every bit as great as sausages that come from Italy. It's an American version of like a Southern Italian salumi. And there's new brands of what they call cupping pepperonis. When they bake, they cup up. And normally a lot of people who don't like pepperoni, and there's very few people who don't like a pepperoni pizza, but for those who object, they say it's too greasy. This is not grease you're seeing in the photo. This is hot honey. And so the story here is that there was a guy named Mike Kurtz. He started a company called Mike's Hot Honey. And Mike's Hot Honey began at a pizzeria in Brooklyn called Paulie G's. And Paulie G's is one of the great wood fire pizzerias of the last 15 years. It opened maybe just before around 2010, 2008. And it has become sort of a mother house of a lot of talented people working there and starting their own places. And he was doing great stuff. And Mike was working in the music industry. He wasn't a pizza maker, but he loved making pizza, loved eating, and he had developed this spicy honey. And so he started hanging out at Paulie G's and asked him if he could come and work the line, just on a voluntary basis. And he was good at it. And so Paulie started giving him shifts. And one day he put some of his hot honey on a pepperoni pizza, on a pizza that was already a popular pizza. They called it the Del Boy. The Del Boy was the name of it, which got turned into the Hellboy. The Del Boy was the name of was the nickname for Paulie's son Derek. So they named this pizza after Derek, and then it got to be too hard to say, "Give me a Del Boy," so they started calling it the Hellboy. And with the hot honey on it, it made it spicy. So Paulie G opened another pizzeria around the corner, a slice shop specializing in pizza by the slice, in which he put this on, and he called this the Hellboy sliced pizza. So as a result of the interest that was generated at this one pizzeria in Brooklyn, the hot honey thing took off. And at the pizza shows, the competitions, more and more, and I was a judge at these competitions, so I started to see this evolve, that more and more pizzas were being presented to the judges with a squirt of hot honey on it after it came out of the oven. You don't put it on before, you put it on at the end. And that combination of sweet and hot it was like secret sauce. It just made everything pop. So you can see even in this photo, it makes the photo, the pizza just shine. It's just a pepperoni pizza. And yet it's not like any pepperoni pizza you've ever had before. It elevated the simple, everyday, mundane pepperoni pizza to another level. And so now you're not only did it become a successful product, this Mike's Hot Honey is now a global brand, and you can't hardly go into any pizzeria that doesn't either have Mike's Hot Honey, and not just his pizzeria, but other restaurants are using hot honey on a lot of things, or they're making their own. Because let's face it, how hard is it to make a spicy honey? Mike made his unique by finding a particular type of cayenne pepper that is proprietary to him. It's a secret pepper, but really a lot of pizzerias just take local, chili peppers and added it to their honey, and it works. And I've seen more and more places just make their own. But that one thing, that one ingredient was kind of like what would you say, a game changer in the pizza world. And of course, it's going to spill over into other facets of the culinary world. So moving forward, commandment number 4, great pizza always starts with a great crust. An average crust with great toppings can never be more than interesting, while a great crust with barely any toppings can still be a great pizza. Now that's a commandment that I created, and people would debate me on that. There's a lot of people who don't agree with that. They're not as committed to the crust being the key to a great pizza. But most of the people I know, most pizza freaks that I know, would rate the crust at it be somewhere around 70 to 80% of the importance of what establishes the greatness of a pizza. Some people will go as high as 90%. Jeffrey Steingarten, when I went out and we went to DeFara's Pizza in Brooklyn, which was a famous iconic pizzeria. The owner of DeFara's, Dom DeMarco, just passed away like a month ago. It was a major event in the pizza world. But we went there for pizza, and on the way there, he said, "I got to warn you." He said, "For me, pizza is 90% about the crust and only 10% about the toppings. I don't care how good the sauce is, how good the cheese is. If the crust isn't great, I'm out of there." And so he wasn't blown away by the pizza that day. What we found out was when we had the pizza there, and I told somebody, I said, the crust wasn't all that great. It was a little soft, a little soggy. And they said, "Well, didn't you have them throw the slices back in the oven?" And I said, no one ever told me I had to do that. He said, "That's the secret. At the forest, you have to have them throw the slices back in the oven for 2 minutes. And when it comes out, it's a totally different pizza." And we didn't know that. But I've tried that since, and it's true. It's true. If your pizza crust is not blowing you away, you can put it back in either on a hot deck or put it in a skillet and get that crust, reheat it. And while it stays hot, it's going to be twice as good as before you did that. But anyway, the idea here again is that it's all really about the crust. And so you can do anything. Here's an inventive pizza. There, a lot of people for this book, because a lot of people were sending in summer recipes, because that's when I was collecting them. I saw a lot of pizzas with corn and a lot of pizzas with peaches. And they're naturally, now this is one from one of the great pizza makers in the world, Tony Gemignani. Some of you may know him. Tony's based in San Francisco. He's a world champion. In fact, he's the first and maybe only American that ever won the world championship of margarita pizza in Naples. He's the first American to beat the Napolitanas at their own game, and almost had to sneak out of town because they were furious that an American could dare win the best margarita in the world. But of course, he's a competitor. He'd already been the world champion acrobatic dough tossing guy. I mean, he's famous. He's got videos all over the internet, and he's got these great pizzerias, including Tony's Pizzeria, Pizza Napolitana in San Francisco, where he also has a pizza school, and now he certifies people. And he's not content to just have like about 15 pizzerias around the country and a school. Now he's opened a bagel shop next door to his pizzeria because he's always looking for new frontiers. And that's one of the trends, I'll mention it here, is you're going to start to see a lot of pizza place people getting into the bagel game. And bagels are having yet another kind of moment, in the spotlight. We'll see this for the next couple of years. I think it's just starting, but Tony's got a bagel shop now too. But this is a pizza that he created called, let me see, what did he call this one? The peaches and cream. Oh, here it is, peaches and cream California style pizza. So it's based on a moment, and I didn't know this until he told me the story when we put it in the book. It was based on an experience that he and I had when I was visiting out there many years ago, when we were just getting to know each other, and we had some peaches. We'd gone to the San Francisco farmers market, down in the down in the old terminal building. And what's the famous uh, uh, Frog Hollow Farms was selling their peaches. It had already been written up in national magazines as having the best peaches in the world. Jeffrey Steingarten talked about the bricks count in these peaches. And so we were both having for the first time a Frog Hollow peach while we were talking and getting to know each other. And it was, again, a jaw-dropping moment. We were like stunned how good this peach was. And that moment, he never forgot that moment. And that inspired him to create this peach pizza for a competition later on, where he competed against some chefs, some well-known hotline chefs, not pizza makers. And he put his pizza up against their food, and he won the competition with this pizza. So again, going sweet is another option. This particular one has, what do we have here? We have whole milk mozzarella, just regular shredded mozzarella, walnut halves, some gorgonzola dolce, which is a creamy gorgonzola cheese, a kind of a super ripe but not too strong gorgonzola style cheese, a whipping cream, balsamic vinegar, ripe peaches, and a little bit of a simple syrup that gets drizzled over the top. So he's just playing with flavor. In the end, we're just talking about pizza as a flavor delivery system. If you can deliver it with cheese and sauce, why can't you deliver it with a lot of other ingredients? They don't even have to be Italian themed. They can be, working with what you have regionally, internationally, et cetera, et cetera. Wolfgang Puck proved that at Spago 35 years ago when he introduced, the pizza, 2 pizzas every day on the menu based on what was available at the farmer's market, and started introducing Asian flavors and other kinds of flavors that totally changed the definition of what a pizza could be. And even if looking back to those pizzas then, as good as they were, they're not as good as the pizzas that are being made today. But they paved the way for this new way of looking at pizza. Another commandment, and this actually comes from Tony Gemignani. I got it from him. On every box at his pizzeria, he's printed the words "respect the craft." He's been the sort of the spokesman for people understanding that pizza making is a noble craft. It's not just a trade, not just a business. So respect the craft is the commandment. And I thank Tony in this particular part of the book for coining that phrase and making it popular and giving a sense of nobility to the craft of pizza. And all the great pizzaiolos are bringing that same ethic and ethos to the pizza craft. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing probably the greatest pizzas that have ever been made, in the history of pizza are being made at this very moment, and will probably keep getting better and better, as folks continue to press the envelope of what pizza can be. So we'll go down and see what's next. Oh yeah, so here's like another. This is a Neapolitan pizza. So this is wood fired. These are the ones that became very hot and popular 10 and 15 years ago with the wood fired ovens, the 60 to 90 second bake, the big puff, the Italian flour, the margarita being the best example of it, fresh mozzarella, et cetera, et cetera. But here's another phrase that kind of came into popularity the last few years, coined by some pizza makers. This is commandment number 6. The single most important tools for pizza makers are our hands. These hands, I'm using quotation marks, these hands are the mark of a true artisan. So there's a guy named Rob DiNapoli who makes, who's a tomato canning guy, DiNapoli tomatoes, and he's gone into partnership with Chris Bianco to create a special line of organically grown canned tomatoes they're the comparable tomatoes in this country to the San Marzano tomatoes of Mount Vesuvius. Rob DiNapoli and John Arena, another great pizza maker who's featured in the book, they kind of came up with this movement that they call the "these hands" movement, recognizing that for a craftsman, someone who approaches this work, it's all about the hands. Mixers and rolling pins and all the other tools are important, but it all begins with the hands. The hands are the most important tools. So it's just kind of a way to give focus to the craft aspect of pizza making. So this pistachio pesto pizza is actually created here in Charlotte, just a few miles from my house, There's a pizzeria here called Inizio, and he's featured in the book. This is a pizza that he developed, in addition to the normal classic Neapolitan pizzas, the margaritas and the marinaras and a few others. He's got this pizza with a pesto made with pistachio nuts instead of walnuts, and it's beautiful. And it's become a signature pie for him, a destination pizza for anyone who goes to that pizzeria. You get whatever you want to get, but make sure you get the pistachio pesto pizza. That's sort of how popular this one has become. And his name is Grant Ahrens. And this is an example of a guy who came. He was in the pizza world for many years. He had a college style pizzeria called Farley's that was just doing your everyday good pizza with wings and the usual stuff. And he went to Naples on a trip and fell in love with the Neapolitan pizza and became obsessed with it, and decided to open, in addition to Farley's, which is located on the college campus here, open a Neapolitan wood fire place that he felt could rival what you could get anywhere else in this style. And he's done really, really well. He now has like 4 locations. And the biggest challenge, and anyone who's got a successful pizzeria knows, the biggest challenge is finding people who care as much as you care to come and work for you. And that's really what it's all about now when you get to this level of craft. It's not for everybody. It's hard, demanding work. Another commandment: when it comes to bread or pizza dough, understanding fermentation is the key, and time is the most important ingredient. So now here is a Detroit style pizza that's baked in a square pan. It's a part of this booming Detroit style world. And if you're making a Detroit style pizza, which is a thicker crusted pizza baked in a pan, you definitely need to not only ferment the dough and use time as your ally to get better fermentation in the dough, but then when you put it in the pan, you have to let it rise again. You don't bake it, after it's been panned like you would with a round pizza where you just pop it right in the oven. This one has to rise for 3 to 4 hours before you take it to the oven. This pizza, the sad story with this pizza is that Sean Randazzo, who created it, and was one of the sort of the new generation of champions of the Detroit pizza movement. In fact, he even had a company in Detroit that supplied pans and Detroit style tools for anybody else who wanted to get into it. And he was doing workshops teaching people every trick in his arsenal, and became, and as a young man, won a world championship for this Detroit. He took it to the world. He took Detroit pizza to the world and helped to elevate it from being sort of the secret of Detroit to breaking out and showing up in cities all over the country. Sadly, after Sean gave me this pizza for the book, he died of a brain tumor, 44 years old. It was like heartbreaking. It wasn't even like Dom DeMarco, who was 88 or something when he died. Sean was in his prime and left a family behind. It was a heartbreaking thing. He wasn't even able to get a picture to me, because obviously he was in treatment. And so this is the one picture in the book that wasn't provided by the pizza maker themselves, because each one of them gave me the beauty shots that either they or a photographer took. So this is one that we made. We recreated this one in my bake shop at Johnson and Wales. And this was the one pizza that I made for the book, following his vision for this pizza, which is essentially it's got chicken. We see a lot of chicken being used as chicken and bacon. Ranch dressing is being used a lot. Obviously, these things work because they have so much flavor, and they work especially good on these thicker pizzas because these are like sponges for flavor. So in this pizza, the one thing that I did with this pizza that was not his technique, but a tweak that I added to it, was a technique that I introduced in the previous book on pan pizza, where we embed some of the cheese during the 4-hour rise when the dough is in the pan and then rises to fill the pan. We put half the cheese on the dough at the beginning, and the dough rises around the cheese and embeds it in the crust. And I had talked with Sean about this technique because it was something I developed and came up with on a project I was doing for a restaurant in Texas. And he got pretty excited about it. And he said, I got to try that. I'm going to try this technique first chance I get. And sadly, time ran out. But we saw a number of pizza concepts came in that used ranch dressing, and of course bacon, chicken. And bacon is a recurrent theme on a lot of the pizzas. There's just never enough bacon going around. So here's another category of pizza. This is a big pizza baked in a cast iron skillet. And this once again comes from Tony Gemignani, who's again, he's one of the few that have 2 recipes in the book. Here's the commandment. I'll read with it. A recipe is a template, a guideline, but it is not a law. Understand the letter, but follow the spirit. So, there was a short period of time where the Italian Neapolitan pizza community formulated these hard and fast rules about how to make a perfect VPN, Vera Pizza Napolitana, Naples style pizza. And a lot of pizzerias in this country got certified in this technique. They were using the Italian flour, the San Marzano tomatoes, following the rules strictly. And very few of them made it. There's a couple that are doing a great job of it. You have one in Chicago, Spacca Napoli, that's featured in the book as well, that does a phenomenal true Neapolitan pizza, because Jonathan Goldsmith went and lived there. He lived there and learned from the masters and came back and took that craft very seriously. But a lot of people just wanted the certification, the tools, but they couldn't deliver a life-changing pizza, which is what people feel when they go to Naples. They go, pizza, they've been to the mountaintop, and pizza will never be the same for them. So there's a few pizzerias here that are achieving that, but not many that haven't. And so there's been a plateau of that style of pizza. It's not going to go away. It's a great pizza, and people will keep trying. But then there's other variations. So in Chicago, Kathy, I'm going to need you to jump in. Remind me, what was the name of that pizzeria you were talking about last night? That
Bert's.
Bert and Bert's, and what's the other one?
Pequod.
And Pequod. So this is kind of a play off of Pequod and Bert's pizza. For those of you in Chicago who know that place, they're baked in a pan, and what makes them so wonderful, and theirs don't look like this except around the edge. What makes them so wonderful is they've got this crispy, cheesy, crunchy edge around the outside, because they're baked in cast iron pans. And so Tony came up with one that is both baked in the pan, and it's got tomatoes that are baked on during the baking cycle. And then when it comes out of the oven, he puts fresh tomatoes over the top and dollops of fresh cheese on top of that, and drizzles some other kind of sauce over the top of all that, and shines it up. And so it's vibrant. It's beautiful to look at. And yet it's got sort of that crunchy crust that people love, and then the explosive flavors of both the fresh and the cooked tomatoes. So he's really, again, playing with this notion of pizza as a flavor delivery system. He's got even some jalapeno peppers on there. It's just this pizza is an explosion of flavors. And so essentially, and here's a guy that has internalized the pizza rules, because he made the best margarita pizza in the world at this competition, following the rules. In fact, he knew the rules better than the judge, who started to, because he was an American, they thought they could sort of overpower him a little bit with their what's the word, their sense of imprimaturness. They started telling him he was doing it wrong, and he wasn't supposed to use this particular box to raise the dough. And Tony said, no, this is the authentic traditional way. And the judge started giving him a hard time. And the head judge came over and pulled the judge aside and said, no, he's right. Tony's right. This is his way is the authentic way. You're wrong. And so he knew what he was talking about. But at the same time, and as many of you know, if you're going to break the rules, then you need to know the rules. And so he's not really breaking rules. He's expanding the scope of what the rules can be. And I think, and that's what I call the spirit. The spirit of this thing, always transcends the letter of the law. So another rule is, and we've said this over and over again, that the only pizza rule that matters is the flavor rule. And the flavor rule is simply flavor rules. So I get a lot of emails from people that are playing with their pizzas, and they ask me, they say, we came up with something I want to try, but what do you think? Do you think this is a legitimate approach? Is it really pizza, or is it allowed to do this? And I'll usually ask them, do you like it? Does it taste good? And they go, yeah, we love it. Everyone loves it. I go, well, then who cares if it's broken any kind of, culinary rules? If it works, the rule that trumps the written rule is the flavor rule. And so if it passes the flavor rule, then don't apologize. Keep making them. Now, here's a style of pizza that is an older style. It's an Alsatian pizza that is in France. They call it tarte flambée. In the Alsace region, they call it flammekuche. And basically, it's a white pizza made, in whatever their style of pizza crust is there, which can be yeasted or not yeasted. But it's just basically a white pizza, usually with bacon or speck or some kind of other, but a white sauce, a white creamy sauce. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. I think there's something about this flavor combination that has, can only just say has traction. It's once you've tasted them, you kind of get hooked on them. And so both Brian Spangler and Leo Spizzeri, who is a Chicago, we're going to talk about Leo in a second, he's a Chicago guy. Both of them have 2 pizzas in the book. And they both submitted a tarte flambée, and they were both so good, similar but different, that I felt like I had to put them both in. So this is a picture of Brian's, but in the book, you'll see Leo's version, which is also equally beautiful, equally delicious, with slight different tweaks. But there's something, again, you bite into this and this white creamy sauce, almost like a bechamel. It just melts in your mouth. Pardon me. And then the smokiness of the meat, it all works together. So I think we're going to see this. And if you haven't seen it anywhere, if you have a Trader Joe's anywhere nearby, they sell a white pizza, a white tart. I think they call it a mushroom tart, I forget what the actual on the box is, but they have 2 of them. One is a mushroom, and another one has, I think, some meat on it. But basically, it's a tarte flambée. They just didn't want to use the word tarte flambée, but it's this pizza, and it's probably one of the best things. I mean, there's a lot of great products at Trader Joe's. This is one of the top 5 for me, and you can get one there that's pretty decent. But if you decide to make Brian or Leo's version, it could change your life. At least it did for me. So I'm up to rule number 10, commandment, and there's actually 11 commandments. I'll get to the 11th in a minute, but the 10th one is tradition should be honored and respected, but as a verb, not a noun. Pizza tradition is constantly expressing itself anew in the ever-present now. And that's what pizzas like this one by John Gutekunst, who's in, he's in, where's he, Athens, Ohio? No, let me get John's pizza up here. Yeah. So John's located, his pizzeria is called Avalanche Pizza, and it's in Athens, Ohio. Yeah, Athens, Ohio. He is really creative, and he comes up with all sorts of new concepts. He has the traditional pizzas, all the standards, because still people are going to, always punt for the standards, but he's constantly bringing out new ideas and exploring what's possible. This is kind of a cross between a focaccia and a pizza. And he's using a poached pear. Then he's got some kind of a drizzle, a maple syrup drizzle that goes over the top, bakes it with walnuts and blue cheese. And he calls it a schiacciata, which is sort of the Tuscan term for a focaccia. And it's absolutely stunning, delicious. And it's just one of many things. But see, he was again trained classically as a chef, and for many years worked as a white tablecloth chef. And then he fell in love with pizza, as many people have done, and decided to just go into pizza, but he didn't want to abandon, this fount of creativity that's constantly bubbling in him. So he writes articles in all the trade journals of new ideas. He's constantly coming up with new ideas. When I interviewed him, and I'm mentioning all this backstory on these folks, because if you're interested in any of them, just go to pizzaquest.com and put their name in the search engine and listen to the interview that we did with them. So the interview with John, I thought was really, really interesting, because he's so inspired and so creative that you can't help but feel more creative yourself when just by watching, because he triggers creativity in us. He's on fire with it. So I really fell in love with him and his pizza, and he's featured. And then what do we have? We have any others here? Yeah. So one of the last ones in the book is a stromboli, and there's a guy in Texas named Lee Hunzinger who is a New Yorker who moved to Texas and took all this pizza training, that he brought with him from New York, and started expressing it in Dallas, and the surrounding area, and became really well known. And in addition to doing pizzas, he makes a stromboli, which is a rolled up pizza. And Brian Spangler became very good friends with Lee. I got to know Lee, through the pizza expos. I interviewed him as well. And Brian said, I think that Lee's version of a stromboli, which originated outside of Philadelphia, by the way, strombolis are a Philadelphia thing initially. And of course, you can get into arguments about all these origin stories of pizzas, but there's a place just outside of Philly that claims to have invented the stromboli. But Lee's version, he says, is by far the best he's ever had. So we got him to demonstrate on Pizza Quest how he makes his stromboli, and then he submitted it for the book. And I love this shot, of course, because there's another shot even better in the book of the stromboli cut with the cheese kind of oozing out. But it's rolled up, it's loaded with meat. It's kind of like a pizza and a hoagie all rolled into one, if you can imagine that. And then there's one other pizza that I'm going to go to this one, a different slide here. So this is one, we couldn't do this one here for the food historians in Chicago without doing a Chicago stuffed pizza. And Leo Spazzeri's feature with 2 recipes. You saw he's got one on the tart flambe, but he also submitted, and this has become one of his signature pies. In fact, he does a YouTube video showing people how to make this stuffed pizza, and I think it's had over 1 million views. But I love this shot because you see how that mozzarella cheese is just stretching like crazy. When he does his video, he loves at the end, kind of the big reveal at the end is to stretch the cheese as far as it can go, and he can usually get it about 3 or 4 feet, of cheese, and he calls it the cheese pull.
Peter, I'm not seeing the stuffed pizza.
Oh, it's not coming up?
No.
Oh,
we see your old slide set, which is wonderful, but not.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know why. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share again. Now you're getting it?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see the cheese pull that I'm talking about. So that's one of his things. So this, of course, has 2 crusts. It has a cheese underneath, then another crust, then sauce and more cheese on top. And Leo's become famous for this in Chicago. He doesn't have a pizzeria. He's worked in many other people's restaurants, but for the last 8-9 years, he had his own pizza school. He's one of the few Americans trained and certified from Italy in a number of styles of pizza. And he had a school up in the north of Chicago towards the airport. Can't remember the name of the town that was in, but I was there a couple years ago.
Rosemont.
What was it?
Rosemont?
Maybe it might be Rosemont, but it was up there.
Okay. Sorry.
In fact, the school's still there, but he left.
I think it's Lombard.
I'll tell you let me find the in the book. I'll get I think I may have mentioned it here.
I think he's in Lombard.
Lombard. Well, he's not there anymore himself. He's now working back in the industry, working for a restaurant group, developing. They brought him in to develop, new menu items for them. But he's extremely creative and a very dynamic presenter. When he does at the pizza shows, he'll do demos on the floor and start with like 4 or 5 people around him, and by the time he finishes, there's hundreds of people around him because he's a really, really entertaining, dynamic guy. You can see him on YouTube very easily or on social media, and he's becoming more and more of a celebrity. He's working on his first book. I think he's even got a TV show in the works. Leo will become a big star, and he's a Chicago guy, born and bred, and Chicago through and through. So I wanted to give him a shout out here at the end of the slideshow. And so this leads us to what I call the 11th commandment, because all of this is about this journey of, my quest for the perfect pizza. And so at the end of the book, I put in an 11th commandment, and that is, it is more about the quest than it is about the pizza. And the quest never ends. And that's really what Pizza Quest as a website, as a concept, everything else, it's really about what drives people to try to achieve greatness. Pizza is just a metaphor. In my world, all food is metaphor. And it's also pretty good tasting, but it's a metaphor that tells a deeper story. Food anthropologists, writers, food sociologists have written, there's a quote that I love that says, all writing about food is always about something else. And so what I'm trying to explore is, what is that something else? Because pizza and bread both are great metaphors for trying to tell that story and explore that story. So that's kind of what this book's about, what this journey is about. And I'd love to open this up if any of you want to jump in with some questions, or can we
Oh,
go
Peter.
back to full screen, Kath? Can I stop sharing?
Yeah.
You know what, you may want to, sorry, Scott, there's one picture of that cast iron pizza that I think we need to look at, because there was a question whether, I'm sorry, Scott, if there were lima beans or
No.
something that looked like a bean.
Oh, there might be some cannelloni.
Was that
beans in there.
garlic?
I think it's cannelloni beans.
Okay.
Let me get the recipe. Yeah, here it is. Okay. He has gigante, he calls them gigante beans, or other cooked white beans. So he uses the large cannelloni type beans. Yeah, so that's like again, not your typical conventional ingredient. But let me see what else. And then he's got again a sweet syrup that he puts over the top at the end. So it's savory, it's sweet. There's a lot. You're seeing a lot. Mike's Hot Honey is an example. There's a couple pizzas in the book that use maple syrup as finishing sauces. A lot of this sweet, savory combo, which if you want to go to sort of a pizza that started that, talk about the Hawaiian pizza, which is vilified by some but loved by others. The combination of pineapple and ham or Canadian bacon. I think the people were, would always joke about, I'm not having a friggin' pineapple pizza, but there's a reason why pineapple pizza does have a following. It's for the same reason. And it goes to that book. What is it? Salt, fat, acid, heat, or something like that. Salman Nosrat's book. Those four principles are at play. Pizza is a perfect example where those four principles, come together to create an incredible flavor experience. And I think that now you're seeing so many people finishing off their pizzas with something sweet because it makes all the other flavors pop. And so it's not going to go away. This is something that was a breakthrough, that you had to break through sort of the old traditionalists. That's why I have this commandment about tradition is constantly evolving. It's changing. Tradition is not something that means the past. It means something that's constantly expressing itself. And I think that we're seeing right now in the pizza world, there's a couple big trends. One is, this combination of flavors, this new recognition of how flavors work. There's an emergence of sourdough is getting bigger and bigger. It's not going to go away. In fact, eventually, could imagine that a majority of pizzerias will be working with the artisan style pizzerias will be working with sourdough crust, and it's only a matter of time before the Domino's and the Pizza Huts introduce sourdough once they feel that they can make money on it. But sourdough is not going to go away because it is the best way to make dough. It's the most complex, deeply flavored dough. It's just more problematic and troublesome. You have to learn how to do it, but it's coming. And there's more and more pizzerias that are doing it. We feature a few pizzas in here, though, that came from places that specialize in that. Anthony Mangieri in New York City at Una Pizza Napoletana set the stage for that 25 years ago. So it's getting bigger. The other thing is women pizzaiolas. We're seeing more and more women take center stage, and there's a number of women featured in the book. They're winning international competitions, and they're colleagues. They're fully, I think from what I've seen in this new generation of pizza makers, part of the family. They're collegial. There's no competition. Women are not having to, kind of fight their way in anymore. In fact, they're being welcomed in because they're bringing something to the pizza world that maybe, was missing before. So you'll see more and more of women pizza makers, get into the game. I think those are some of the big trends. Of course, we talked about some of the others, bacon and sweet, sweet finishings and things like that. And then these Roman style pizza, which I didn't show any photos, but we feature some Roman style pizzas in the book, which is again a variation of the focaccia style. It's just, somewhere between a Sicilian and a focaccia, but it's airier, and it can go in there's a lot of different definitions now of what a Roman pizza is. But there's one guy who I like named Massimiliano Saiva, who's got one recipe featured in the book, who's creating a style of Roman style pizza. If you just go to Roman Pizza Academy on YouTube and watch some of his videos. If you've never seen or had his pizza, watch his videos because they're beautiful and they're some of the best pizzas I've had. Gabriele Bonci is the most famous guy of the Roman style, but that's more I would call focaccia style pizza, whereas Massimiliano is doing a whole different kind of a thing. It's airy and pillow-like, and a lot of his pizzas finish off with the toppings after they come out of the oven. And he puts, like this pizza we're looking at now, will put his toppings on afterwards. So they're beautiful to look at, as well as having a dough that's unlike any of the other styles. Kathy, why don't you take it from here and moderate the Q&A?
Scott, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, Peter,
Sorry.
we're gonna do my questions live, and then Kathy's gonna read the chat questions. But I did tell Peter before the meeting began, since cheese is such an mostly often used in pizza, an integral part of pizza, I told Peter that the news today is that Kraft is going to open a cheese factory in the Holy Land. Yeah, and he didn't know about that. And he didn't know too that they're going to call it the company Cheeses of Nazareth. So anyway, I will move on quickly from that. But
you're totally free to react. How about a thumbs up, or a thumbs down for you out there? And any of you who know Scott know that that he's got a million of them.
Yeah. It comes out like tomato out of a can. But anyway, there's I want to point out to everybody, and you might have noticed it already, but on the notice that was sent to you, there are several Peter's recipes at the top. You can just click on the link and find the recipes. Anyway, can you discuss, you gave us the definition of pizza, which was great. I didn't really know how simple that definition was. Can you give like a 2 or 3 minute history of pizza, where it came from? And anyway, just where does pizza come from?
There's a lot of, and there's probably some people in the audience here who are historians who know more detail about this. There's a lot of arguments about where they, so I live in a Greek community here. I go to a Greek church, and so of course the Greeks are all claiming that they invented pizza. And there is a case that could be made for that. What became eventually Neapolitan style pizza came to Naples from Greece, from sailors that brought a type of product that they called a type of pita, which is similar to pizza over. There's probably a good case to be made for Egyptian style pizza. The fact is that dough, whether you see if you think about Indian bread like naan bread, or any kind of flatbread, you're already got the base for a pizza. When you put something on it, you've created a pizza, even if you don't call it that. I think that the Italians get a lot of credit, and Naples in particular, for inventing what we call pizza here, the round cheese and sauce style of product, because that's where it took hold. And there's a lot of great lore that started there in the 1800s with, the street bakers making these doughs with sauce and cheese on it, and the guy who created the margherita pizza, to pay tribute to the new unified Italy with red, white, and green. Those stories now are pretty common. And of course, every time you hear one of these stories, then there's someone else will tell you, but that's not even true. That's an embellishment of a legend. So I'm not really sure. I lost interest at some point in trying to really trace the heart of it, because my focus was more on how do you actually do a good version of it. But I think dough with something on it exists in every culture. But then after World War II, a lot of soldiers brought back the knowledge and the experience of having had pizza in Italy, especially ones who were in the landing forces and the invading forces, and they brought pizza back here, and then it took hold. And we started, even though there had been pizzerias in New York earlier, and in New Haven and on the East Coast, and eventually in other cities that came over at the beginning of the 20th century, it was World War II, I think, that triggered the sort of the surge in pizza popularity. And then the chains, Shakey's, came up with a tavern style pizza. That's another trend that we didn't even talk about. Bar pizzas or tavern pizzas, thin crust, with, you know, a lot of cheese taken right out to the edge of the pizza. That's another trend that was popular in the 1950s and is coming back in a big way right now. Some people call them bar pizzas, some call them parlor pizzas, and some call them tavern pizzas. Shakey's Pizza Parlor was the first big chain to create popularity for that style. And then Pizza Hut and then later Domino's and some of the others began to mass produce it and take it, you know, into the franchise realm. And suddenly it swept the country. But why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it become popular when even at the average level of execution, it's still great. It still delivers flavor. It's a perfect flavor delivery system. And it was only later that a few pizzerias, you know, either survived because they were great from the beginning, like Frank Pepe's and Sally's in New Haven and other places that have been around, John's in New York City, that survived and had people from the family keep it going. But then this artisan movement started in, I would say, in the 1990s, parallel to the bread movement, the artisan bread movement and the craft beer movement. All of these things started around the same time because they're all about fermentation and they're all following very similar internal drives, you know, to kind of transform food through understanding fermentation. And it elevated the whole category. And so that's what we're in right now, is sort of the peak time of this elevation of the artisan craft pizza movement. I was told by the editors of the pizza, one of the pizza trade journals, that 50% of the pizza, of the fresh pizza, not frozen, but of the fresh pizza in America, comes from three main companies. You know, Pizza Hut, Domino's, and it might be, maybe it's four companies. It could be Papa John's or one of the Little Caesars. Half the pizza sold comes from those four companies. The other 50% comes from the small independent pizzerias, and they divide up the rest of that pie. And so, and they're all fighting for their survival. Some of them have multiple locations, some are just standalones, but they have to find a way to survive against the scale that these big pizzerias can, the economy of scale gives them a big advantage price wise. So how do you do it? You've got to come up with a better tasting product, something that changes the perception of the end user to be willing to pay the value added cost of this better product. That's the challenge, and that's what people have risen to. And I think and then the winner of all that is the consumers. You know, if you get on a quest, you'll find a place that meets your own personal criteria, and we all have our own criteria of what determines greatness. I don't want my commandments or my own definitions to define that for everybody. It was just the idea was to inspire some people to get on their own quest, and then, you know, and it doesn't have to be pizza even. It could be on anything. We're seeing on social media so many types of quests: the hamburger quest, the taco quest, the macaron. There are people who are obsessed with macarons the way that I am with pizza. It's the same quest. It's just and it never ends for people because it's not the end. There's no end to it. You don't hit one and you go, oh, that's it. My quest is over. I found the perfect macaron, or I found the perfect slice of pizza, because there's always going to be more, and you're going to be hungry the next day. Anyway, let me open it up.
Okay.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, Kathy, I was going to say, let's turn it over to chatty Kathy now.
Okay, so Diane said, what are the most important variables in achieving a great crust structure from edge to center? For instance, Dan Richard talks about no tip sag, which he absolutely gets. What's important to get this right?
No tip sag. Oh, the tip sag, when you hold a slice out and it sags.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. There's another term for it. Well, in the end, the definition of baking is the application of heat to a product in an enclosed environment, meaning the oven, for the purpose of driving off moisture. That's the general definition of baking. Then within that definition, all sorts of transformations take place in the ingredients. Flour, the sugars in the flour caramelize, and the starches gelatinize, and the proteins coagulate. All that's not the definition of baking, but it's the outcome. It's of what happens in the baking process. But this notion of evaporating off moisture is key, because you can't really achieve these other things until some of the moisture is cooked out. With a Neapolitan pizza, when I say Neapolitan, I mean the classic Naples style with the 60 to 90 second bake. it comes out of the oven. It's a thing of beauty. It's puffy around the edges, what they call the cornicion. It's puffed up. It's delicious. It's like just you even the bread without the toppings is just delicious in its own right. It's crisp for about 5 minutes, and then as it sits and cools off, it gets softer, and you can't pick it up. In fact, over there they would just fold it up and almost eat it like a sandwich. Because you can't hold the slice because the tip sags. So when Dan Richards talking about no tip sag, he's saying, okay, that's not the kind of pizza I'm going to make. And I think in the United States, the preference has been through years and years of understanding pizza the way it's come to us, as a crisper product, that we want the qualities of that Naples pizza, but we don't want the sag. We don't want it to soften up. We still want the snap. So in my definition, what I look for in my favorite style pizza is I want my crust to have some snap. And the only way you can get that snap is to bake it long enough to drive off enough moisture without burning the pizza to crisp it, to get it to be crisp. And that comes down to then in the baking triangle of time, temperature, and ingredients, the three components of what baking, is. Everything happens within time, temperature, and ingredients. That I call it the baking triangle. Finding the right balance. So Chris Bianco, one of the things that was a breakthrough for Bianco 25 years ago when Pizzeria Bianco became the poster boy, was that he was doing a Neapolitan style wood-fired oven pizza, but he wasn't baking it in 60 to 90 seconds. He was baking it in about 4.5 to 5 minutes, which meant he was baking at a lower temperature, not 800 degrees, but about 625 degrees or so. And as a result, he was able to get all the puffy qualities of the Neapolitan pizza, but he also was able to achieve the snap in the crust so that when you ate a slice of his pizza, you could hold it up and you didn't have to worry about everything sliding off. That sort of was one of the breakthroughs. Nancy Silverton achieved the same thing at Pizzeria Mozza. These are two of the, again, they're iconic pizzerias because they perfected the craft of their style. Nancy's pizza is slightly different from Chris's. Tony Gemignani's are different from. They're all slightly different, but they're all approaching it as I'm going to perfect the craft of my style of pizza. Nancy even says on one of our videos, when I opened Pizzeria Mozza, I wanted to be able to make the kind of pizza I wanted to eat, and so that was what drove her vision. And in the end, her pizza is baked for 7 minutes, and I didn't even believe that you could achieve a great pizza, that still was moist on the inside but had snap on the bottom. If you baked it that long, I thought it was going to bake it out, but because of the formulation that she came up with for her dough, it retained enough moisture so that all the chemical reactions take place. The sugars caramelize, the starches gelatinize, the proteins coagulate, and it doesn't burn, and the flavors are great, and it's still moist and creamy in between the crust and the toppings. And that's, in the end, that's what makes the pizza so great. And so they all got there in different ways. So there's no one way, but in the end, to answer the question, how do you achieve that in your pizza, is you have to find the sweet spot in your oven temperature setting to get the undercrust to bake at the exact same time that the top and the cheeses and the toppings caramelize. And that can just, usually by the third time you try it, it's either a matter of an oven temperature setting or which shelf in the oven you're baking on. If you're using a baking stone or a baking steel, which radiates heat in the bottom. And if your oven generates a lot of bottom heat, then you bake a little higher. If your oven, if you're using convection, which is a whole different thing, you're probably going to want to bake closer to the middle or upper middle because you're getting a lot of circulating air. So, but you have to bake at a lower temperature. So so it's a game, and there's no one answer other than the general rules, which is time, temperature, and ingredients. And remember that time and temperature are they're your allies. They're ingredients in the process. But usually, and those of you who are, and I know I see some familiar friends and faces here who are making pizzas at home, who are achieving it because they've been playing with it. They're relentless about trying to perfect their pizza, right, Robin, Bill? Relentless,
So on that same question, but I think you kind of answered it, but they followed me up on that same question. Somebody said, how do you maintain integrity of the middle part of the crust after it's on the table?
Well, that happens in the oven. You have to bake it longer. You have to get that crispness. That's what I mean about like the Neapolitan pizzas, they're probably baking, maybe you need an extra minute of bake time to drive off more moisture. We're talking about moisture now. So you have to, in order to get that crust to stand up for the duration of your dining experience, you have to bake it long enough to drive off enough moisture to keep that crust from shelving, from dipping. And so sometimes it means lowering the oven temperature by 25 degrees and baking it for 1 or 2 minutes longer. That's what I mean about playing with those, the time and temperature aspect. So if you're finding that your pizza dough, your crust is getting too soft, when you get it to the table and within 5 minutes it's too soft for you, then you just have to adjust your baking temperature and the duration of the bake. I mean, that's the first step anyway towards achieving that.
Any
I hope
favorite
that
flowers?
answers.
Oh, sorry.
What's that?
Any favorite flowers?
The cool thing about American flour is that there's so much good American flour out there from a functional standpoint. Where there's a big movement again with in another trend in all the baking categories of heirloom grains, regionally specific grown wheat, locally milled. These are all good things. Sustainability is the overall arching term. The sustainability movement is in the pizza world right now, and it's going to get bigger. It doesn't always guarantee a better pizza, using these rare flours and things like that, because you still have to have the craft and the technique, but it can give you a competitive edge if you're in the business and can deliver a great pizza. But as far as general flours, if you go to the supermarket, typically you're going to see General Mills, either Harvest King or Better for Bread, both of which make great pizza. These are bread flours. King Arthur flour, you have bread flour, and they have a all-purpose flour that is higher in protein than other brands of all-purpose flour. Some people would prefer to use King Arthur's all-purpose flour than their bread flour because it's close to a bread flour already, but not quite as hard. If you're doing a New York style pizza, which is the one pizza dough in the book that calls for a higher protein, either definitely bread flour, but if you can get it high gluten flour, that it was designed, that pizza style was developed with strong flour that can be stretched really wide. It stands up to tossing and everything else, and you tenderize it by putting oil in the dough, fat, and that fat could be, well, in the old days they used to use shortening because they considered that superior to oil from a functional standpoint, but most people are shying away from shortening. But something like lard or bacon fat or chicken schmaltz, all of those are fats that could work really well, and there's a couple of recipes in the book that call for that instead of oil. But those are ways, again, that you depending on the style of crust that you're making. So again, the brands: King Arthur, General Mills, Pillsbury, which is also General Mills, and then there's some other brands that in various supermarkets have their own house brands. Whole Foods has their 365. Well, those are all packaged for them by some of the bigger mills. Central Milling out of Petaluma, well, their headquarters are Petaluma, California, but the mills are in Utah. Their flour is being used by a lot of pizzerias. And if you go to Whole Foods and buy their 365 flour, that most of that is coming from Central Milling. That's high quality flour in its own right. So there's very few brands that I can even think of. I can't think of any brands that make it to the shelves of the regular, supermarkets that doesn't work, that isn't good. And after that, it's just, you got to kind of make enough pizza and play around with maybe some side-by-side batches to determine which one you like. Or if some people like to blend a little all-purpose with some bread flour. I always prefer unbleached. I will always choose unbleached over bleached because I think it has more flavor and aroma. There's a big argument in New York about bromated flour versus non-bromated. Most bakers have moved away from using potassium bromate to which helps to make dough puff more, rise more in the oven. There was a big argument about that the classic New York slice pizza went downhill as soon as they started to not use bromated flour. And I'm not sure if I'm not sure how much of that is an emotional argument and how much of it can be proven in parallel taste testing and things like that. But in the end, I think that I tend to try to stay away from bromated flour because I think there's some health risk, but not, most of us aren't eating enough of it that it's going to be the cause of something for us, but it could. So why mess with it? And it's not good for the planet. So I tend to use unbromated flour and unbleached flour when I can. But brand wise, I'm pretty ecumenical about, I think I made pizza on all these brands. I made bagels on with all these brands. And if you didn't tell somebody what the brand was, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't say, oh, that's not as good as the one made with the King Arthur flour. But if you love King Arthur flour, or if you love Better for Bread or Harvest King, you stick with it. In the end, it's all the flavor rules, the only rule that matters.
So how were pizzas made in the US, in US pizzerias before World War II? Were there significant differences compared to today's pizzerias with flours, leavening agents, toppings, ovens, etc.?
I don't know for sure. And we may have some historians here that do have an answer to that. And if you do, we may want to give them a minute on the mic. But my understanding is that, say, before World War II, that I'm going to guess that most of the flour was coming from a few mills, and was most likely, well, very, I don't know when bleached flour came into vogue, but it was probably bleached. The yeast was usually fresh yeast, not dry yeast. Dry yeast was more of a home baker's tool, very rarely used in professional bakeries until recent times, when some advantages were found by using instant yeast and other kinds of dry yeast. But there's still a lot of bakers who insist that it's not the same that the fresh yeast gives it a flavor, imparts a flavor, because you use more of it. It's not as concentrated and it has a flavor. I've worked with all the different yeasts. They all work from a functional standpoint. And that's a big term in culinary schools. We're teaching our students about the function of the choices that they make of the ingredients. And so that they don't just get to choose an ingredient. They have to explain to us what the function of that ingredient is in order for them to have chosen it. And so I think that all the yeast can now work. But back then, in those days, I would say probably almost everyone used fresh compressed yeast, and fat was usually shortening, not liquid oil. And there's still pretty strong belief and maybe some evidence that shortening does has more functionality than liquid oil. It doesn't. It does, for some reason, it produces a more tender product.
So what are your thoughts of experiences using a rolling pin? It doesn't seem to slow Mark Iacano down any, although it's supposed to be sacrilege in the tradition.
Well, Mark is a great pizza maker in New York, and he's become famous for, I think he uses a wine bottle sometimes instead of a rolling pin, to roll out his pizzas. And his pizzas puff in the oven, and they work. And I think part of it is he he doesn't like to be bound by rules either. He's from Brooklyn, he's going to make pizza his way, and he wanted to show that you don't have to be gentle and hand stretch it that way. He's happy with the way his pizzas turn out. Personally, and there's a time, and certain recipes, even in this book, call for you to roll the dough out because you need to get it thinner and you want it to be more even and everything else. And usually, if I am going to roll it out, which means I'm being more brutal with the dough, I'm toughening up the gluten, because the more you kind of handle the dough, the tighter the gluten gets. Then I'll usually provide some resting time afterwards for the gluten to relax a little bit, so that from the function of what it's doing, so that it doesn't make the dough too tough. And so I don't know. I haven't eaten it. I've seen Mark's pizzas, demonstrated. I've never eaten at what's the name of his place in Brooklyn? I blanked out on it, but it's a destination pizzeria in Brooklyn, and everyone who's had it that I know of says that it's fabulous pizza. But more people would do it if it was. Now, I went to a pizzeria in Chicago about 10 years ago, and they were it was new, they were hot, they were hardly able to keep up with the demand. And they were running the pizza doughs through a machine, like a rolling machine, and then staging them on a platform. And it was just killing me to watch them, like brutally handle this dough to stretch it out in order to get them lined up. But by the time they got turned into pizzas, they probably sat there for 30 or 40 minutes and maybe did tenderize and still worked. The pizza I had there that night wasn't very impressive, but I thought that seemed like a violation of a functional rule. But then there's these guys that are doing it, they're rolling it out. So there's no absolutes on this. I would just say guidelines. And in the end, if the pizza's working, the flavor rule trumps the written rule.
So I think this is a reference to the cast iron pizza, but what percentage of the topping should be baked with the pizza and what percentage should be fresh added after cooking?
Well, there's no rule on that. You can bake 100% with of the stuff on it, or 5% of the stuff on it. In this case, I think it's like the tomatoes and maybe some cheese are the only thing baked on it. But it depends on what you're trying to achieve with that pizza. This is focused on these sort of fresh ingredients with just a little bit of cooked stuff and soft cheese underneath. But there's no rule on that. I think it's just on the type of pizza that you're trying to make. But if you're making a cast iron pizza where you really want, like Bert's pizza, where you really want it, it's all about that crispy crust edge. That all the ingredients are pretty much baked, on the pizza. Not very little is added at the end. Maybe some fresh Parmesan or something like that. But it's not designed for a lot of fresh ingredients. That's kind of a more recent innovation I think we're seeing. And as I say that, I realize there are probably places around the country that have been doing it for generations that we just don't know about them. But I think this is a trend, is a new thing, because it's visually beautiful, and the combination of fresh flavor versus in contrast and concert with cooked melty molten cheeses and hot tomatoes and things. It just works. It gives you another layer of flavor that you weren't getting before. But I can't answer that question with a rule, because there is no rule. In this particular pizza, Tony's pizza, let me see if I can get back to it. There's 4 ounces of mozzarella, shredded pizza cheese, mozzarella, that goes on, and some provolone, 4 ounces of provolone or fontina. All that goes on before the bake per pizza. 2 ounces, because this makes 4 pizzas, so 2 ounces per pie, and some pizza sauce, and then everything else goes on afterwards, including the goat's milk, cheese, and things like that. So it's about 50-50, but it's really that's what we call the baker's choice. That's where the artist and the craftsperson gets to make the call.
So have you played with the home pizza ovens like Uni, Rockbox, I think Brayville? Do you have a favorite?
Well, I use the Breville one because they gave me one. I didn't want to spend $900 for one, but they gave me one because I was testing some pizzas in them to prove that they work. And I'm very impressed with the performance of my Breville. I do, believe it or not, in this little home office, I turn this into a little pizzeria and do live demos, on Zoom. And I make this into a pizzeria, and I can bring my little Breville into my office and bake them in there. And I can do both pan pizzas. There's a setting for pan pizzas, and you can also do Neapolitan pizzas on them one at a time, and they work great. The Unis and the rock boxes, I think, were game changers. I think that all 3 of those together represent a real shift in the home pizza making movement, because they've democratized pizza making. They're affordable. Some of others of you are more in tune with the consumer trends and directions and things like that. Maybe want to jump in on this. I would, Meathead, you might have something to say here, because you see what's going on out there in tools, in the world of people buying tools. But I think that the response from people that are making great pizzas in these, and the passion that they feel when they have a tiny little oven and didn't have to invest a couple $1,000s to build a wood-fired brick oven, and could make a great pizza in a portable little wood-fired or gas-fired oven, they get so excited, and the pizzas are coming out beautifully. You just can't. Oh, you would think you can't do a commercial operation that way. There is a guy in Rochester, New York, has a mobile pizza operation. We have a interview with him on Pizza Quest, and the name of his operation is called Peels on Wheels. Peels on Wheels. And what he did is he got a little mobile truck. I think it's a 3-wheeler, and he got 3 or 4 rock boxes, and he set them up in the back. And when he opens up the back of his little truck, you've got basically 3 or 4 mini ovens. Each one can do 1 pizza at a time. And he'll pull into a place and he'll make the pizzas one at a time, but he's cranking them out. So he can do 4 pizzas at any time, just like somebody with a large oven could do 4 pizzas. He can do 4 pizzas, but each one in its own oven. And when he opens the back and he fires up the oven, it looks like a rocket ship. I mean, these beautiful golden flames are coming out of there. So he even made his little rock boxes work in a commercial setting. But anyway, my experience has been that they made it easier, affordable, accessible, and they work. So and the most expensive one is the Breville, which I have, but I don't know, they sold out in their first run. They've sold out before they could even get them into the shelves of the stores. So people are willing to pay more for something like that if it works.
Actually, I know somebody who did build the wood-fired oven in the backyard type thing. He got a Breville, and he was using that backyard a lot less.
Exactly, and I think this is a real challenge for the wood-fired, like the Forno Bravo, which is the sponsor, one of my sponsors for Pizza Quest. This is going to be a real consumer challenge for them. They've already had recognized they needed to move more towards the consumer and not the commercial side, although they do both. But their challenge is not from the other wood-fired companies. Their challenge is now from the Uni and the Rockbox people who can undercut price-wise, and so they've got to come up with a competing product, and I'm sure they will if they want to stay relevant.
So our last question, it appears, do you have a favorite supplier of pepperoni, prosciutto, and salami?
Well, one of the ones that's hot right now is Ezzo, EZZO. They are getting used by a lot of what's the word? Cutting edge pizzerias. Even Hormel. We have one guy in the book named Nino Caniglio, who is a world champion pizza maker in his own right. He's out of Brooklyn as well, and Nino's a character, and he's like a rock star in the world of pizza. He's using Hormel, believe it or not, Hormel cupping pepperoni. So even Hormel, which is a big company, is recognizing that there's a big trend going this way towards higher quality salumis. So they're coming out with they're up like a premium version. And Nino swears by them. I tried to find some in my local supermarket, and I just found their normal stuff, and it was okay. But Ezzo is one brand. Other than that, I think, because I think they're available on a wider scale, they got distribution. I don't know. I think other than that, all I can think of is trying to support your local salumerias, and the guys who are doing it in your local town. So I'm sure in Chicago there've got to be a few charcuterie type places that are making great salumis of all styles, and I'm guessing that many of them are getting into pepperoni. There was a reason why even though pepperoni gets sort of poo-pooed by the Italiophiles, the ones who are like hard, that nothing's as good as the salumis coming out of Italy, is because it's ubiquitous and it's cheap and it's easy to make. But it actually works. It even average pepperoni has a lot of flavor. I mean, it's got paprika, it's got spices, it's got all sorts of things, and it works on a pizza. Now the time has come where people want to raise the game. If average pepperoni works, what happens if you have great pepperoni? And that's kind of what we're seeing. We're starting to see some better versions that could stand there, or maybe in a competition against, in some kind of a salumi competition, held in Sicily somewhere, where there's impartial judges, if that's possible. They might hold their own in a competition. We don't know. The same way that American wines are holding their own and American cheeses are holding their own now in international competitions. I think the charcuterie and salumi sort of categories in this country are matching what's going on the world stage. But I don't know the names of, I have a local place that I would go to. I think when in doubt, just go to your local, artisan, what do they call it? A pork shop, then get your salami there.
By the way, that same person did ask, had you ever tried Creminelli in Salt Lake City?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I love their product. I've had it. Yes. Yeah, everything that I've had of theirs was really, really good. There's another one that we used a lot in our videos. La Quercia, and I'm not sure exactly where they're based. Somewhere in the Midwest, somewhere. La Quercia does really good, pork products, and they even have guanciale. They've got all sorts of cool stuff.
Well, Iowa's popping up. So, by the way,
Are they in Iowa, Peggy? As Peggy says, Iowa is Iowa where La Quercia is based.
I think she's right. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I
I love their product. Everything I've had of theirs was really good.
Right. And I know there's been a number of compliments and things like that. And I'm going to give you the feed. Peter, this was great, as always. Learned a lot.
Well, I could talk about this all night. I feel like I went over, and I'm sorry about
Well,
that.
that's okay. It's okay with me.
But it's when you all know this, because all of you are, passionate about the things that you love as well, that when you're talking about something that, you enjoy, you can just stay up all night and talk about it.
Oh, no, your depth of knowledge is great. Scott, you want to turn it over to you?
Well, I just want to thank you for sharing your pizza passion with us tonight. It was savory food for thought, and everything you said was delectable. And I don't want to sound too schmaltzy though. So thank you again, Peter. And when's your next book?
Well, I'm currently not working on one. I've got a couple ideas. We were waiting to see when I talked to the publisher about doing a volume 2 of Pizza Quest, because I realized I have enough material that I could do this again. Of course, being the publisher, their response was, well, let's wait and see how sales go on this one, and I understand that. So the book's only been out and available for a few weeks now. And there was an NPR feature that some of you may have heard that broke on Monday. And I don't have the link here to put up on the screen, but if you just Google, NPR and put my name in there, it lead you to that. It ended up being a 3-minute feature, and it was nicely done. The interview was 90 minutes long. We did the interview about 6 weeks ago, and for 90 minutes, she had so much material. And I'm thinking, how are you going to get this down to a short story? And she did. She got it down to in 3 minutes of distillation from a 90-minute, conversation with all sorts of great sound bites left on the cutting room floor. But anyway, that just got out there, and that bumped that apparently this immediately bumped the book up to #1 in the pizza category on Amazon. So we're hoping we can hold it. As Ben Franklin says, you've got a republic if you can keep it. So we've got a #1 if we can keep it, and we'll see how it goes. And then, hopefully I'll get this back to Chicago. I think Meet had mentioned that the school I was referring to is in Lisle, right? Am I saying it right? Lisle. And that's the place where it's still going. The school is still going, even though Leo is no longer teaching there. But he's going to eventually, he'll be doing some public classes in Chicago, and he's working on trying to bring me into Chicago to do something at a venue at some point. And when we have it, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Because I always love to come to Chicago. So, and look forward to seeing some of you in person the next time I do. And again, I want to thank you all for for coming tonight. If you want to do any follow-up, you can write to me. My email, I'll put it on here, is peter@pizzaquest.com.
That's pretty easy.
Pretty easy to remember. Peter at Pizza. Yeah, you can write to me there, and I try to get back there to people within a day or two. And we're still posting new stuff on the pizzaquest.com, the website. We're branching out. We're doing not just pizza. We're we've done a couple things with a guy nicknamed the Cheese Dude. So we've been doing some focus things on cheese. We're getting ready, if it hasn't gone up already, with Lou Bank, who's a Chicago guy who I love, who's big in the mezcal, agave spirit world.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
got his own podcast called Agave Road Trip, and I'm going to be a guest on his podcast, but he was a guest on ours, and he basically took me through a horizontal tasting of various agave beverages. So, and because again, we're finding that same passion and that same commitment to craft, to raising. You've got tequila and you've got everyday mezcal, and then you've got these artisan sort of hard to find mezcals that are on a whole different level. And he opened my mind to understanding what those nuances and differences really are. So we think we can explore these same, everything becomes a metaphor for something else. And I think that really the theme for me in the next year is what is that something else that's driving all of us, and that we explore through food, but it's touching something deeper than just the food itself. And then I don't think we'll ever get to the end of that one.
Well, thank you so much again. And so next month, when you have your new book out, we'll have you back. So
I'll get to work, but I don't know if they're not ready to do another Pizza Quest book, then I do have one that's half finished that I may try to get back on. It'd be on a whole different subject from this. So I'll keep you posted.
and I asked Peter, I did ask Peter when we were kind of checking technically all the stuff, and we were doing a pre-Zoom call, and I looked at the library behind him and I said, "Are all those your books?" But I guess not, but he's very prolific. So, and we will look forward to your prolificity in the future.
I don't know if you can see it. There's at the right over my left shoulder, there's a loaf of bread here. It looks like a loaf of bread. It looks like a loaf of Lionel Paulhan bread, and that is a pillow. That's a pillow that looks like a loaf of bread. I've had that pillow for 20 some years, ever since I went to the Paulhan bakery, and I love that pillow because it really looks like one of those loaves of bread. And anyway, look forward to seeing you all again soon. And
Thank you.
thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.